You're watching Alabama football on YouTube. This is Alabama Crimson Tide recruiting. Trey Yanity joined as always by Andrew Bone, 18-year plus veteran in the industry, guys. You can find him on Twitter at Andrew J. Bone, always providing you the best coverage in all things Alabama football recruiting. A lot to talk about tonight, Bone, as we kind of recap this A-Day 2022. Some big-time visitors in town, of course. I know you had the chance to speak with some of these guys after their visits. Excited to hear about what they had to say. But guys, as we get into the video tonight, be sure to hit that like button. Get in the comments, let us know what you think about A-Day, some of the recruits that you saw visiting, and your thoughts on all things going on with Alabama football. And guys, don't forget, subscribe to the channel. If you haven't done so, turn that bell on so you can get notified when we go live and post videos just like this. Bone, how you doing? And how was A-Day 2022 from your standpoint?
Well, it's good. It's good to be back to some normalcy because, and we've talked about this kind of throughout the entire spring that kids didn't get a chance to attend spring games last year. They didn't get a chance to visit schools throughout the spring. They had to wait until the summer. And once you kind of get into the summer months, you're either attending camp or you taking official visits. This is a little bit more relaxed where you can just come in, have some fun, and we've seen so many top kids visit Alabama throughout the spring. I have said this over and over and over. It doesn't really matter who all comes in for the spring game. If you can get kids on campus anytime throughout the spring, it's always a good thing. And for the most part, Alabama was able to get, I would say, 95% of their top targets on campus, over the course of the last month and a half. I mean, there have been so many top guys that have visited, whether it was on a Saturday for a scrimmage, maybe the A-Day game, or if it was just a Tuesday for practice. Just getting these kids on campus, obviously, very big. And we saw so many top recruits in Tuscaloosa this past weekend in the 2023, 2024 recruiting classes. And, some of the bigger names that were there that I know Alabama fans are excited about. And we're going to talk about some specifically, but Richard Young, the one of the top running backs in the country, was back on campus. Had a chance to talk to his coach about the trip. Another great visit to Alabama. And, a lot of people assume that Alabama is in the driver's seat. He's not saying that Alabama is the leader just yet, but I think it's pretty clear that Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Florida, all those schools are going to be fighting hard for his signature. I don't think he's ready to commit just yet, but I do think that Alabama is going to have a great chance to land him. And if I were to predict his commitment today, I would pick Alabama, but let's see how these visits go during the summer when he takes these officials and then when he gets ready to make that decision. Because, any school can leave for a program after the spring. It's all about these official visits, these summer visits, and, just really trying to narrow it down. Obviously, another big thing about it this year is, how much is NIL going to play as a factor in these kids' decisions. And we keep seeing more and more stories come out, crazy stories about kids making decisions at the last minute because some new NIL deal came through at the last moment last year in last year's recruiting class. So what's it going to be like this year? Who's going to care more about it? Who's going to be set up, to have those type of deals, for recruits? So, obviously Alabama is going to have a ton of success on the recruiting front, no matter what. I think they, put some things into place where they can, battle against, Texas A&M and some of these other programs that have put a lot of resources into the NIL stuff. And I think Alabama's, kind of figured out, how to handle it, how to do it. I think, probably last year they were probably, trying to figure out, exactly what was going to be allowed, what was going to pass. And I think Alabama was probably a little bit more, I would say cautious on it than maybe some other schools. But now that they see, everything that's kind of going on, I think, once they kind of figured all that out, hey, it's probably going to be a different ball game for Alabama in this cycle. Even though they finished with the number 2 recruiting class in the country last year, I still think, they probably missed out on some guys due to some NIL deals that they may have, had set in stone before they made that decision last year. So we'll see what all transpires in this year's recruiting class. But for the most part, we've talked to so many top recruits who've come to Alabama throughout the spring, and including this past weekend for A-Day, who just had such a great time, learned a lot more about NIL during their visit, and we're going to see a lot more of these kids back in Tuscaloosa throughout the summer.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And NIL, like you said, really changing the landscape of college football. Something we're still figuring out, how it's going to exactly change the game. Interesting to hear Nick Saban's thoughts on that, and Dabo Sweeney, and a lot of these different coaches, their unique approaches to NIL. But going to be a fun class to follow any way you draw it. So we talk about the quarterbacks now here. Arch Manning, of course, the hot name, maybe the hottest name in recruiting history, but Eli Holstein has been in very high interest with Alabama. Very talented quarterback, just the same. Made his third trip to Tuscaloosa in 2022 already this past weekend. Where do things stand with Holstein at this point? And, what's kind of the timetable on his decision?
And I'll talk about two quarterbacks here that both visited visits for Alabama this past weekend. Let's start with Eli Holstein. Obviously, we've talked about him on the show, so many different times. I mean, this was his third trip to Alabama this year. He came in for Junior Day back in early March. Was also back in town for a scrimmage, and then came back for the spring game. So obviously, there's a lot of interest there from Holstein's part. And, Alabama certainly holds him in high regard as well. Visited Florida this week. Now he's going to go through spring practice. His spring practice is about to crank up. He's going to get a lot of different coaches that are going to come through. I think he's going to take some visits this summer. And that also probably gives Alabama a little bit of time to kind of figure out what Arch Manning going to do, because Arch, visited Alabama, last month. There's high interest, obviously, there, in Arch, or actually it was earlier this month. He was at Alabama on April the 2nd. So there's high interest there on Alabama's part with Arch, obviously, and vice versa. So a lot of it kind of comes down to who's going to end up committing first. I don't think either one of those guys is ready to commit just yet. They're going to wait it out a little while and then make that decision. But getting Holstein back on campus, getting him to talk was also a big thing, because he's been keeping things pretty tight-lipped over the last few months. And, a lot of people have been interviewing his father about these visits, and he finally kind of opened up after this past visit to Alabama, and, had a chance to talk to him on Sunday after the visit. Just another great trip. Loves Alabama, loves what Alabama can provide for him. His family loves Tuscaloosa. A chance to bring his mom and his little sister and dad back to Alabama with him this past weekend. Just continues to grow more comfortable around the coaching staff, but also around players. He spent a lot of time with Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson, who kind of gave him the lay of the land. He told him what Alabama's all about. He really liked hearing all that. So he'll be back in the summer, no doubt about it. And could easily see him as Alabama's quarterback in the 2023 class. But Arch Manning's not going away. I mean, just because Eli Holstein keeps visiting Alabama doesn't mean that things are, completely out of the running that Alabama's completely out of the running for Arch. They're still in it, and it's going to be a intriguing battle. But one other quarterback I did want to mention that visited Tuscaloosa once again was DJ Lagway. He is the number one dual threat quarterback in the country out of Willis High School in Texas. Visited Alabama for Junior Day earlier this year, came back to Tuscaloosa for the spring game, and there is a lot of interest there from Lagway's part in Alabama. They like him a lot. They're really making a big push. He visited some other schools throughout the spring, including Georgia, Texas A&M, but definitely has high interest in Alabama. Is going to come back in June for another trip. So keep an eye on DJ Lagway. Maybe Alabama's quarterback in that 2024 recruiting class. So obviously we're focusing on that 2023 class a little bit more, but it's never too early to talk about 2024 recruits, especially ones who could potentially commit, before before the start of their junior season even.
Yeah, no doubt. Never too early to start talking about some of these guys. And we're going to follow that 2024 class in depth here. But as we kind of talk about some of the in-state guys in this 2023 class, some other guys that had the chance to visit this weekend, guys we've been talking about for a while as well as Eli Holstein, Peter Woods, Tony Mitchell, Hunter Osborne, Wilkin Formby, all in town this weekend. Now, Alabama is really high on these guys. What's kind of the timetable looking like for these in-state kids? I know they've had the chance to visit a bit more than some other players around the country. And, a lot of these guys still really not showing their interest in one direction or another quite yet.
Yeah, I think with Peter Woods, we've been talking about him, for the last 2 years on our show. I mean, this is a guy that we've always felt like is going to end up in Alabama's class. Been to Tuscaloosa so many different times, including the 8A game this past weekend. When's he going to make that decision? I've seen some reports that he could be getting pretty close to making a decision. But I talked to his head coach just the other day, Mark Freeman at Thompson High School. He doesn't think Peter's going to be making a decision in the near future, potentially before the end of the summer, but he wants to enjoy that process a little bit more, go on some summer visits, get a chance to enjoy those officials before making that decision. Does he know where he wants to go? Probably so, but he still at the same time can take these trips, enjoy them, and he's going to know that a spot's still going to be available for him at Alabama whenever he's ready to make that decision. Tony Mitchell, getting him back on campus, obviously big because he's taken a lot of visits over the course of the last month. At one point, Florida was named the leader. Another point, Texas A&M was named the leader. I don't know if he necessarily has an overall favorite right now, and it's probably going to go back and forth for the next few months with Tony. But I think Alabama's just continuing to chip away there. They're going to continue to recruit him, and in the end, I think Alabama's going to be fine regardless of what he ends up doing. But they're certainly continuing to press for him. They really like Tony Mitchell a lot, and he's definitely a top target for them. Wilkin Formby, in-state local lineman for Alabama. I meant to say kind of in-city local lineman at Tuscaloosa at Northridge High School. He just dropped his top 5 this week. But Alabama, in my opinion, is in very great shape with him. Visited campus, 3 or 4 times this spring. Just really just kind of went over there for practice. Didn't really even announce that he was going over there. Just went over there to hang out with Alabama offensive line coach Eric Wolford and just be around the program. I think we'll probably see him make a decision sometime this summer after he takes some visits, and then the other guy, Hunter Osborne, Hewitt Trustful, defensive lineman, really, kind of come on strong over the course of the last few months in terms of Alabama's pursuit of him. Received an offer back during Junior Day in January, and really ever since then, Alabama's push for him is really, amped up. I don't think he's quite there yet in terms of making a decision. We'll probably see him make a decision, maybe in June or July. But I think he wants to take in some camps, take in maybe a few official visits before making that decision. But it seems like Alabama's in pretty good shape with all those guys. Maybe not as good a shape with Tony Mitchell, but I think it's getting better, especially with him not really in a rush to make a decision, and then getting back to Tuscaloosa just more and more. And then you got to think if Peter Woods makes a decision, commits to Alabama before his season, if Tony's not on board with anyone yet, that Peter's probably going to be recruiting him to join him at Alabama if he makes that decision early.
Oh, definitely. We've seen those efforts in the past there, even at that school alone. So, going to be exciting to see kind of the timetable with a lot of those guys. Would love Alabama to continue to win those in-state battles. As we kind of talk about some more guys in-state here, move a little bit further south to Montgomery. Quay Russo and James Smith, 2 priority targets. I know they had the chance to return Saturday as well, and I know you had the chance to speak to them about their visits. How'd they go, and what's their mindset right now on their recruitment timetable?
These are 2 guys that that don't really like the spotlight. I mean, they're both 5-star caliber players. I mean, they're both heavily recruited, both certainly top priorities for the Alabama coaching staff, along with several other schools. And they don't like to do many interviews. I had to get up on Tuesday morning, or I guess it was Wednesday morning at I think I interviewed both of those guys at 5. Right before 6 a.m. It was around 5:55 a.m. yesterday morning when I interviewed both those guys. They had just finished their workout at Madhouse Training in Montgomery, and so I had a chance to catch up with both. I'm sure they were thrilled to talk to me as soon as they got finished with a 5 a.m. workout. But we still got some good stuff with them. Quay was a little bit more talkative than James was, but Quay really had a great time in Tuscaloosa. Spent a lot of time with Mac Wilson, former Alabama linebacker, who's also a former Carter High School product, and also trains at the same facility as Quay and James. So there's definitely a lot of recruitment going on there with Mac Wilson to those guys. But I think the biggest thing that Quay liked from what he saw was all the sacks. Obviously Will Anderson, Chris Braswell, Dallas Turner, made a lot of noise on Saturday during that spring game, and that's something that Quay really likes seeing. He loves to rush the passer, likes to play on that edge. Of course, Alabama's talking to him a little bit more about playing inside backer. Can also be an outside guy, but he's around 6'3", about 200 and a little bit more than 235 pounds right now. So he's a big dude, big kid, yeah, but you can move him around, and kind of the same with James Smith. I mean, this is a guy, different position, but you can move him up and down the defensive line. He's 6'3", 305+ pounds right now. He doesn't really have a preference as to which position. He just wants to be able to make plays on that defensive front, whether that's at defensive end or defensive tackle. He feels like he's got a chance to be a complete player on the defensive front. So those are two big time guys that Alabama is certainly targeting. Getting them back on campus was huge because they had not been back since January. They've taken a few visits to Georgia. Obviously, a lot of other schools are strongly in the mix as well. They're in no rush to make a decision. I think both of them are going to be announcing top 10s, top 12s this week at some point. We know Alabama is going to make the list for both of those guys, and they'll be in it all the way. Even if they narrow it down to a top 3, I think Alabama is always going to be in that top group. They're going to wait until the early signing period in December to announce. These are two guys that I don't think anyone's really going to know. It may not even be them until a day or two before they sign their letter of intent. So it's going to be an absolute dogfight for both of these guys all the way until the end. I do think it's going to be more of a battle between Alabama and Georgia. Could change down the road. We'll see if anybody else really becomes a major contender. Obviously, Auburn is strongly in the mix. Miami, Texas A&M, all contenders in there. But I think that in the end, we're going to see both of those guys either at Alabama or Georgia. Both of them want to play together. I'm not sure if they're both leaning towards one school right now. One could be leaning one way, one could be leaning another. But I think in the end, both are going to end up at the same school.
Yeah, it's the package deal. It's like we're at recess. No, I love it. Representation there out of the great city of Montgomery. Guys, hit the like button. Show some love for these in-state guys. Had the chance to visit this weekend. No, another big-time name that is not being recruited out of high school. Tyler Harrell had the chance to be in Tuscaloosa this weekend as well. We've talked about it, endlessly on this show. Alabama's dominance in the transfer portal last season, this season, of course, as well. Already, filling some huge positions of need. You'd love to add another wide receiver. Tyler Harrell, seems to be that deep threat, the prime candidate at this point. When do you expect him to make a decision? And, do you expect it to be Alabama?
Well, I do expect it to be Alabama. As far as a time frame, not sure. I mean, he can announce the decision before we get off this show today. I think that he knows where he wants to go. I think it's just a matter of time of when he's going to announce, and that could happen, probably any moment. I think there's some other schools that are certainly wanting him to visit before making that decision, including Miami. Originally from Miami, so I know that they're trying to get him in for a visit before he at least announces that the transfer decision. But I think Alabama's in great shape here. This would be another home run hitter for Alabama in the transfer portal at the wide receiver position. They already got one wide receiver in Jermaine Burton, so they go in and get another outstanding player here in Tyler Harrell, and I think they are in really, really good shape for Harrell at this moment.
Yeah, it's just been amazing to see the skill position dominance, if nothing else. Be great to add another veteran wide receiver to this very young core at Alabama. Let's shift and talk about a few more other out-of-state guys. Malik Muhammad had the chance to visit for his second time in the last 2 weeks, along with Jonte Cook. Can Alabama steal either one of these two guys out of the state of Texas? Had a lot of success there, but going to be tough to grab both of these guys. Do we see one, potentially even both of them being taken away from by Alabama?
I think the more you get these guys on campus, the better of a chance you're going to, have in landing them, especially with these Texas kids. It's already hard to get them on campus before an official visit because, obviously the travel expenses and everything, and all these different programs are trying to get, these guys on campus every single weekend. Texas A&M, obviously a lot of excitement going on with their programs right now. Trying to build up their programs and try to create a lot of excitement there. So I always think that it's going to be tough to recruit in the state of Texas, but Alabama has been able to go in there, have success, Can they get Malik Muhammad? I think they've got probably a better chance with Malik. Look at that, 100% Texas A&M. Alabama fans, that might just be one prediction. So just don't think that's 20 predictions from the best recruiting experts in the country right there predicting 100% A&M. That might be one prediction from an A&M reporter predicting Malik Muhammad there. So I certainly think that Alabama is in that top two for Malik with Texas A&M. So, but it's obviously a pretty tight battle there. Jonte Cook. Jonte is pretty funny because he's gone on these trips to Texas A&M before he visited Alabama, saying, couldn't really find a lot of football trophies at these different schools, but once he made it to Tuscaloosa, found plenty of football championship trophies. So he had a great time in Tuscaloosa. He even posted he had a cameraman. I was about to say a camera crew. He had a cameraman following him around throughout the weekend in Tuscaloosa. Posted a pretty cool video. I think they had to stop before they went into to Coach Saban's office, but he got a chance to really show what the visit was like. So if you get a chance to check that out, be sure to do so. But definitely a top wide receiver target for Alabama. Getting him back on campus huge because he hadn't visited since last summer. They need to get him back again. Get him back for an official visit. Get him back for a game this fall. I don't think he's in a rush to make a decision. I think we're probably going to see him decide, later on in the year. But Alabama's in this thing, and I think they'll be in it for a long time.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, Alabama has dominated the state of Texas over these last several years. Really, since Nick Saban has been in office here, the Jalen Waddles, Jalen Milroe, Kamar Wheaton, these guys. It'd be great to get two more here in both of them, at least one out of these two guys. Hey, Texas, at least getting one back from Alabama in Agiye Hall, making that commitment just a couple days ago. You had a couple future casts out, and for Makari Vickers and Jordan Renaud, both Rivals 100 defensive players, and they both visited this past weekend as well. As far as the decision goes with these two, where do they stand right now with Alabama, and when do you see this decision being made?
Yeah, Makari Vickers out of Tallahassee, defensive back, recruited more so as a corner, but can play other positions in the defensive backfield. I don't think he's necessarily settled in on a position just yet. He's going to come back to Alabama's camp this summer, work out. They'll probably decide then exactly kind of where they see him. He's a top recruit. I mean, he's a guy that has the green light to commit. This isn't a situation where he has to come to camp. It's just as a situation where come to camp to kind of figure out, where they want to use him, either as a safety or the cornerback. But right now, looking at him more as a corner, they like him a lot. He's visited Tuscaloosa, 6 or 7 times already. I think they've got a great chance to land him. Probably going to end up being between Alabama and Florida State, but I think Alabama, currently is in the lead, and I think in the end he ends up picking Alabama. And then Jordan Renaud, defensive lineman, out of Legacy High School in Tyler, Texas, same high school that sent Jamarion Miller to Alabama this past year. So some connections there. He visited Alabama on Saturday. High interest there on his part. I think he ends up committing to Alabama. Now, does that happen soon, or does it happen 4 months from now? I'm not really sure. We kind of thought he might decide a few days ago, but decided to wait. He's now saying that he's probably going to wait it out, take some visits this summer. But I think Alabama has a commanding lead for him, and they're going to be in good shape with Jordan Renaud until he makes that decision.
Guys, keeping that like button for me as we continue on here with Alabama football recruiting. The coaches now have been able to return this season. It's been great in so many areas of the game to see the normalcies come back into it. But one thing I've loved to see is coaches being able to get back on the road this season. First time since 2019, since they've been able to do this. You have a feature on Bama Insider right now with the new recruiting territories for the Crimson Tide. Let's talk about some of those new coaches. Obviously, Joe Cox, Eric Wolford, Coleman Hutzler, and Tavarius Robinson, T-Rob. The new coaches on this staff. What are their areas looking like? And, which coach do you think has the biggest impact in year number one?
Well, you got to always remember, they may have certain areas, but they're still in charge of recruiting their position. So Eric Wolford may have these certain areas, but he's also in charge of recruiting, his offensive line target. So he's still going after all of his offensive linemen. But Coach Wolford, coming in from Kentucky, he's got Kentucky. He also has a few areas in the state of Alabama, Anniston, that's one area that he's going to be recruiting. Oxford, he's going to be going into Tennessee, and then into Ohio. He's got, I believe, Illinois as well. There's a lot of states kind of around there in the Midwest that he's going to be recruiting. He also has, even though it would seem like Bill O'Brien would have Pennsylvania. Eric Wolford actually has Pennsylvania for Alabama. So a lot of top guys in those areas that he's going to be going after, but especially a lot of offensive linemen. I mean, just on Wednesday, he visited Raquez McElderry, the offensive lineman that's committed to Georgia out of Anniston High School. And so he's going to be seeing a lot of top offensive linemen kind of throughout the spring. You have Joe Cox, who's coming in as Alabama's new tight ends coach. He's going to be recruiting in the Carolina region. So he's going to have North Carolina, South Carolina, and then he's going to go all the way down to Jacksonville, Florida. And there's a lot of top recruits in that area, especially in the Jacksonville area that Alabama certainly has a lot of interest in. And they've brought a lot of these guys on campus throughout the summer. Now, Coleman Hutzler, he's going to have a little bit of a bigger region for Alabama. And this is a guy that is going to be out on the West Coast a little bit. He's going to be up in North California. He's going to be up in Washington and Oregon. So when we talk about, guys like Jaden Wayne, the 5-star defensive lineman, tight end out of Seattle, Coleman Hutzler is recruiting him. He's also recruiting Walker Lyons, the number 1 tight end in the country, out of Folsom High School out in California. And then, he's going to be in Texas. So he's going to have the Houston area. He's going to have Austin. He's kind of South Central Texas. So there's obviously a lot of top recruits in those 2 areas that Alabama is going to be recruiting. And so, going into the state of Texas, going up against a lot of big boys there. What kind of impact is he going to be able to make in year number 1? I think he's going to have a chance to do quite well. Then T-Rob, I mean, one of the best recruiters in the country. There was no doubt what area he was going to get once he got to Alabama. Miami native, so he's got South Florida. He's going to have a little bit of North Atlanta area. So, we're talking about the number 1 safety in the country, Caleb Downs. Number 1 running back in the country, Justice Haynes. Those are 2 of his targets in the state of Georgia. Down in South Florida, obviously, like I said, with Brandon Ennis, Reuben Bain. There's obviously a lot of big time players down there, not only in the 2023 classes, but 2024 as well. And then he's going to go up a little bit, get that DMV area, so the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area. So when people are talking about Nicholas Harbor, the 5-star athlete, freak athlete, one of the best players in the country out of D.C., T-Rob for Alabama is going to be the one that's recruiting him, along with several other guys in that region.
Really
But
exciting stuff.
and you did ask, you asked me who's going to have the biggest impact.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say. I think Eric Wolford's going to have a chance because of the number of offensive linemen that Alabama is going to sign in this class. They want to sign 5 offensive linemen this year. And there's a lot of really good offensive linemen that he's going after. A lot of guys that we feel like Alabama's got a great chance to land. Miles McVay, Wilkin Formby, Raquez McElderry, Caden Proctor, the number 1 offensive tackle out of Iowa, Ola Salinman, 4-star lineman out of Connecticut, from Finland originally. Those are all guys that Alabama has high interest in, that they're heavily recruiting. There's obviously some other guys that they're going to try to get on campus this summer, but I think he's going to have a chance to really make a strong impact in year 1 at the offensive line position, and that's a big need. You look at Coleman Hutzler. What can he do in the state of Texas? That's going to be obviously a tough area to recruit. So how well will he be able to do? And then, obviously T-Rob, can he go into the state of Georgia and get Caleb Downs? Can he get Brandon Ennis out of South Florida? Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds with this new staff on this new Alabama coaching staff, because sometimes it takes them a year or 2 to kind of get their foot in the door and really make a strong impact. It's very rare that we see a guy make a just crazy impact in year 1, but the regions that these guys have, they're recruiting, their pedigree as elite recruiters, they're going to be up to the challenge, and I think they're going to have a chance to make a strong impact in year 1.
Yeah, that was really my first thought. What does this transition period look like with so many important areas, Texas, South Florida, like you said, and obviously some other big parts of the country as well. What does this transition period look like? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. who is going to do the best job recruiting out of these new coaches. Great summary there of what it's going to look like and, where these guys' strengths lie. And as we kind of stay on this topic a little bit, I want your thoughts on which kids they've been going after first. I know they started their efforts last Wednesday, but before we get to that, just from an overall coaching standpoint, who do you think has the toughest area? We talked about some really important areas, but, who is going to have the toughest challenge out of these first year guys? And who's going to be in contention for that National Recruiter of the Year?
I think you got to look at T. Rob. I think he's going to have a not necessarily a tough time because I think he's got a chance to have some success. But when you're going into South Florida, when you're going up against Mario Cristobal, who's a first year coach down in Miami, who's obviously an elite recruiter in his own right, you're going up against that staff down there, and you're also going up against other top programs throughout the country. And then you go into some of these other guys that he's recruiting in the state of Georgia, like Caleb Downs and Justice Haynes. Obviously, Georgia doesn't want either one of those guys to lead the state. So I think he's got his work cut out for him. But I think he's also, like I said earlier, I think he's up for the challenge. As far as looking at some of these other staff members on Alabama's coaching staff, guys who've been there for a while, who could potentially make a major impact, who could potentially be in that running for Rivals.com recruiter of the year. Yeah, I think you got to look at Robert Gillespie. This is Coach Gillespie's time to really shine because there's a lot of guys that are in his area that Alabama has a great chance to potentially land. Richard Young, one of Alabama's premier running back recruits. You got to talk. We're talking about Cormani McClain, the number one cornerback in the country out of Lakeland. That's obviously a big time target for Alabama. Ends up coming down to Alabama and Florida for him in the end, in my opinion. Malik Bryant, out of Orlando, number one outside linebacker in the country. I mean, these are some big time players that Alabama's got a chance to sign. Robert Gillespie, lead recruiter for these guys. I think he's going to have a really good chance to make a big splash and make Nick Saban pretty happy.
Yeah, I think he will too. And, the effort has begun now. Coach has got the chance to start on the road this past Wednesday. What's it been like so far? Which kids are they going after first here on the recruiting trail? And, where do you see them having success early on in this process?
Yeah, so they just started. It was just yesterday. Yesterday on Wednesday was the first day that they were out on the road, and the whole staff didn't go out. It was just a few staff members that went to different places. The rest of the staff kind of hitting the road today, Friday. So you're going to start seeing a lot more coaches tweet out, thanks for this coach for stopping by. Thanks for Alabama for stopping by. You'll probably see some more offers that get extended. We saw one actually earlier today. Micah Weiss from Oklahoma announced that he had an offer from Alabama. So Coach Wiggins was in Oklahoma yesterday and today. I know Eric Wolford was around the state of Alabama yesterday, visiting Anniston High School and visiting some other schools in Alabama. You also had Freddie Roach visiting an intriguing prospect we've talked about on Bama Insider over the course of the last few months that we hadn't had a chance to interview quite yet until today. Elijah Davis, a defensive tackle over at East Mississippi Community College, big time player. This is one of two JUCO players that Alabama's targeting that they're really pushing for. He's 6'3", right over 300 pounds. I talked to his defensive line coach on Wednesday night, who happens to be a former Alabama defensive lineman, Brandon Dedrick, who also played in the NFL for several years. And he just had glowing reviews about Elijah Davis, and really feels like he has a chance to potentially be the number one junior college player in the country. But Freddie Roach, that was his first stop for Freddie yesterday, was to go see Elijah Davis, and Alabama certainly putting that full court press on him. They want him as a part of their team. He's a early enrollee, so he'll be graduating from JUCO in December. So obviously that's very beneficial, and definitely something that Alabama likes those JUCO guys who can get there in December. They don't really target a lot of JUCO guys that have to wait until the summer to enroll. So they try to get those guys there as early as possible. But this is a guy that I could easily see in Alabama's class is Elijah Davis out of East Mississippi Community College. And we'll have an interview with Elijah on Bama Insider on Friday.
Yeah, guys, be sure to check that out when it drops. East Mississippi Community College. I think that was the Last Chance U featured school there in the first season. So really cool stuff, guys. Be sure to check that out and everything else going on in Alabama football recruiting. Like I said, you can follow Andrew on Twitter at Andrew J Bone. Always dropping the latest on everything going on in the world of recruiting. So, as we close it out here tonight, just your final thoughts on A-Day, the visits this past weekend, and what you expect to see in these next couple weeks now that spring practice is over and the coaches are finally able to get out on the road.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was a great spring. Great to get a lot of kids. A lot of top kids on campus throughout the last month and a half. We saw a lot of kids come in for junior days. We saw a lot of them come back for spring practices, for the spring game, and now it's just going out and evaluating guys, going out and seeing who you're missing. Who's better than advertised, who's not as good as they're advertising. And that's what this spring and really the camps in June are all about, is really evaluating guys and making sure you're making the right decisions. See a lot of top guys that are going to come in for camp. You got a lot of top guys that have Alabama maybe as their favorite right now, but they still might need to come back and camp before Alabama gives them that green light to commit. So it's going to be pretty fun. Going to be a lot of excitement that's going to go on throughout the next few months. But yeah, I think over the course of the next month, what we're really going to be watching is these spring evaluation visits for the Alabama coaching staff. We're going to have a ton of content on Bama Insider. When kids are getting seen, when they're getting evaluated, who gets a new offer, who they may back off of after they see them perform. But it's going to be a lot of recruiting scoop on BamaInsider.com.
There is, guys, as there always is. So be sure to go to Bama Insider. Follow Bama Insider on Twitter at Bama Insider as well. Like I said, one more time for you, at Andrew J Bone. Turn on those notifications. And guys, you're going to want to turn on the notifications for our YouTube page as well, because we're going to be dropping videos when commitments break, other breaking news surrounding Alabama football, of course, as well. Our live shows, everything else going on in the world of Bama football. We got it for you. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button for me one more time before we get out of here. Get this thing up to 500 likes and get in the comments. Let me know what you think about A-Day this past spring here, and what you expect to see for the rest of the spring into the summer. For Andrew Bone, my name is Trey Yanity. This has been Alabama Crimson Tide football recruiting on Alabama Football YouTube. Until next week, guys, have a good one. Roll Tide.